Good afternoon, guys. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Maz. I'm the head of product modeling for market data at CRU.
Hi, my name's Harriet Thomson. I've been at CRU for about 3 years now, and I've been working really closely with the Sigma team for about 2.5 years.
We are part of the product modeling team, which the responsibility is to build, manage, and maintain supply and demand models across the different CRU commodities. And we are going to walk you through our data transformation journey.
To give you a brief introduction to CRU, CRU is a global leader in commodity intelligence and market analysis. We provide insight for the world's leading industrial and technological companies to help them navigate the complexities of the commodity markets. We have over 50 years of market analysis experience shaped by customer needs. We have over 450 experts worldwide, and we serve clients across mining, metals, and the fertilizer industries.
So what happened when you have 450 experts working in 14 locations in Excel silos? How do you keep years of expertise trapped in individual files, or actually the minds of the expert? And how do you store that knowledge when somebody actually leaves the company? So these are all very valid questions. Every company actually have them. CRU tried to actually find a solution for them. For us, this is actually 55 years of valuable IP that is at risk. So if we want to take any kind of inspiration from the commodity industry into how we can manage our data, if we look at any commodity value chain, we start by a raw ore that goes through a series of different processes, whether it is extraction, processing, all the way to actually reach a final product stage. The same thing goes for data, which goes through a series of transformation and optimization before it's actually ready to be fed into our supply and demand models. And at each point of that journey, basically, the data needs to be standardized, managed, and stored in a data warehouse to make it available for consumption. So remember that our business actually rely on that data.
So what exactly is the issue with the data journey that Maz just walked us through? So essentially, in the previous state, all of this was being done in Excel. We had roughly 150 to 200 Excel models that fed into 83 different products across CRU. Every single one of these models was a web of interconnecting Excel files that had sometimes dozens or even hundreds of different tabs. Some of these were really functional and worked great for our analysts. Others were inherited from a previous analyst, and they weren't well documented, so they relied heavily on the expert's analyst knowledge and were difficult to hand over or explain to someone who wasn't familiar with them. We didn't have a lot of great documentation on these models, and we didn't have any way to enforce governance on them. As many of you probably know, Excel is really great and can work really well for individuals. However, from a corporate perspective, it didn't really align with our strategy and what our customers were asking for. Clients were demanding faster and more reliable ways to deliver data. And Excel has a lot of manual processes that were really prone to error and created bottlenecks in our analysis forecasting. However, this is how it was done for many years, and we also spent many of those years looking for a new solution to solve our issue. So there are a few main pain points here. The first one, which I spoke briefly about, was governance. As many of you are probably aware, it's essential to have models that are governed well. We did have a central glossary, however, we didn't really have any way to enforce it. Changes in metadata couldn't be regulated in Excel, and they couldn't be permissioned. So here's an example of the United States of America. It has a number of different names, and across different products, it could be called different things. If you are one of our clients who subscribes to multiple products, you could see different names in different data sets, which could be really confusing. Additionally, if you're internal and you're using data from another product, you might not have a match between those specific data points. We also had a number of key people dependencies. Because our Excel models were so siloed, It was really difficult to create transparency between the teams. We ended up in a world where we relied heavily on our experts' knowledge, and we couldn't easily transfer between people in different teams. Our client data was also delivered in Excel, which was not the best format for us. Additionally, our analysts often focused on one specific region within a product, and while they were really familiar with the market, it didn't always align across the entire product. So, for example, our North American analyst might forecast the data in a certain way, whereas our European analyst might forecast in a different way. This obviously didn't align, and it made it really difficult for them to work together. So that brings me to business alignment. When you don't really have visibility on how other teams work, it's really, really hard to work across different teams. It's also a lot easier to scale data models to new commodities when you have data that actually aligns. Finally, our consulting teams, they work really closely with the analysts, and it's essential that they can understand the analysis models to deliver insights to clients. If they're able to do that on their own using clear documentation, they don't need to rely so much on analysts and can deliver better insights to our clients.
So our main mission at CRU is to break silos. We wanted to move from a silo London-centric organization where data only lives in or actually owned by specific teams and people to a modern data intelligence partner, which is shaped by customer needs. So we recognize from the beginning that the value that we provide to our customers is not just in the data, but it's also in the analysis and the insight that our global specialists actually provide to our customers. That's what gives it its true value. Meaning that we wanted more for the analysts to do what they do best and less time for them to actually manage the data. So great. So what do we actually wanted as a solution? What was the desired state that we wanted to be in? Well, we figured that we wanted a centralized data system that allows data to flow in a timely manner, feeding into cloud-based models. These models can be reached by our global expert via a browser everywhere in the world. That means that basically this is more centralized, but at the same time, it's reachable by everybody. The same thing when it comes to actually the whole, let's just say forecasting or actually the whole modeling process. We wanted to standardize it across the commodities as well as in terms of actually how they ingest the data, how they model the standardized calculation that they do, all the way to how they deliver actually the results to our customers. So all the models should have the same look and feel and the same kind of processes governing that. Great. That is actually sounds simple enough. So how do we actually implement it? Well, we thought that a one approach would be actually to go through all of it would be too much. So what we decided on is a phased approach. First of all, we move all the supply and demand models into the modern platform, and we expose that data into our internal data catalog. This way, we are able to test it and make sure that it adheres to the high standard of CRU. And basically, in the second phase, this is when we start actually sharing that data with our customers. So the big question is, how do you move over 150 supply and demand models into the modern platform without disruption? The simplest answer that we could find is actually you have to standardize as much as you can. That means you have to have a cookie cutter approach. By having that, it will serve in terms of the standardization of the whole modeling process. It will also allow you to look at all the models in a way that breaks them down into what makes them tick. That means identifying what they need to produce actually a robust output. And it will also help you in terms of analyzing the workflow of the analyst as a whole, understanding their pain point and trying to integrate all of these solutions that you're trying to actually, build in a way. So in terms of, this is how we created actually the Market Data Hub. The Market Data Hub is a data warehouse made of the combination of the different technologies that you're seeing on the screen. And basically, these are the technologies that are used during the manufacturing of the data process. In the beginning, we started actually by recognizing which parts are too idiosyncratic. These are the parts where the analysts actually collect data. For example, they try to clean it up before they're able to actually ingest it. These part actually stayed in Excel. We also try to actually centralize the model building process to one team, which is the product modeling team, our team, who is responsible for building, managing, and maintaining all of these the supply and demand models. This also allowed us to unify and standardize the workflow of the analysts, whether they're working in steel or aluminum or any other commodity. We also focused on embedding strong governance from the moment of the data inception and throughout the workflow of the analyst. All of these governance actually happening in the back end, so the analyst doesn't need to worry about it. And basically, that also allowed us to control how the data look and feel when we share it with our clients. So all the data have the same kind of dimension. And because we actually, we also introduced actually permission control that actually allowed the editors to control which version of the data actually feeds into their model or actually feeds into their release in a way, and which person actually press the final button to say that this data is now ready to be shared with our customers. Finally, because we have different releases over time, basically all these releases create data versioning. We embedded data versioning actually from the get-go, but we have also data versioning of the output, and that actually opens up a lot of opportunities. Now, for example, they're using AI to experiment a little bit on it, but also in terms of democratizing the data or data access in a way. We have a consulting arm within the company, and basically now they're able to get the latest and greatest data directly from the catalog without actually going through a team or a member of the team for it.
So how did we actually do this? As you can imagine, when we were looking for a solution, we had a long list of requirements. We essentially wanted a centralized set of models where analysts could input their adjustments directly into the data. Sigma was a great solution for us, as we could input data directly into Snowflake and then send it to our data catalog. Sigma also had really good permissionings, which allowed us to assign roles and enforce different types of users that we weren't previously able to do in Excel. We also had a number of glossaries, and we could now use those to control data governance and ensure that we are using the same metadata across the company as a whole. So to develop the cookie cutter approach and the model that we've rolled out across the business, we went through a lot of iterations of different models. We tested a number of different ways to build them, and we found a way that was really efficient and promoted the best sort of data quality. So to do this, we had a specific flow of the models that we had in mind. So previously we had encouraged this, but it obviously wasn't enforced in Excel. So something that we really wanted to have was data separated out so that analysts could see their input data that's either being ingested from Excel or from a third party or from another model. They could review it, make sure they're happy with it, and then they move on to the modeling tab. So this is an example of a page where analysts are going to be doing most of their work. So they'll enter their adjustments in there, calculations will be done in there, and then they'll move on to their view tabs. So the view tabs allow us to reconcile data that's created by each team within the model and account for any discrepancies and imbalances that might occur. So previously models were regional. Like I said before, we might have North American and the European models being done separately. Now they're all together in the same Sigma model, and you can look at how balances add up and then reconfigure accordingly. Finally, they can look at the final output and send the data directly to Snowflake and to clients. So within the modeling tab, we worked really closely with Sigma to find the most efficient way to build these models. And we also worked really closely with the analysts to understand their workflow and what worked best for them. So this is the type of model that we ended up developing. It went through a ton of iterations, but this you can see is one gigantic table. You can filter above on the commodity that you want to look at and then also the region. So this is something we worked with Sigma to develop and has worked really well for us. Within this, so preliminary numbers are calculated and then analysts can add adjustment into specific fields. So you can see an example here. These are really tightly controlled, and this allows us to create a bit more transparency and visibility into the model. Previously in Excel, if the analyst didn't like a calculation, they could just change it or add a hard-coded input on top of it. Now they can't do that, which if you're someone else who's looking at the model, it's a lot easier to understand and then explain to clients why a certain number has been adjusted. So this has created a lot of value for our clients. First of all, like I said before, our analyst insight is a lot better. We have a lot more transparency in our model, and they're all documented really clearly. Previously, we might have other analysts across the business understand how a very specific data point was calculated. Now in Sigma, they can look back, see the calculations that are being done. They don't have to go through a web of Excel files, and they can answer those client questions a lot better. Additionally, now that we're on a modern data delivery platform, our clients can directly download data using an API. Previously, we were delivering our data using Excel. This isn't great, and it wasn't versioned very well. Now we have an API, they can simply refresh the API formula, and they'll see the latest version of the data. Finally, 70% of our renewal base is now in modern platforms. This is obviously huge for us as a business. Having data in modern platforms, it's a lot more robust. Before, we had a lot of Excel errors that would pop up just to the manual and clunky nature of the process. Formulas could easily be changed or manual inputs written over existing formulas. Now we have a lot fewer errors in our platform.
So like Harriet actually mentioned, so far we have moved 70% of our renewal base of the market data products into our internal catalog. And we're working actually on sharing that with our customers now. That is over 14 models combined, basically encompassing about like 100 or so. And those feeds into 30 products. We learned a few things along the way that I would like to share. Hopefully it will help somebody going through a same data transformation journey. So championing change. Change is always scary. Having champions across the board, whether it is from junior analysts to business leaders, will actually help spread adoption like wildfire, and it will actually focus everybody on the bigger picture. Well, what is the bigger picture? Actually, the values that you're adding. Through the data transformation, you're adding actually, like for example, I'm mentioning in here improved governance, data traceability, standardized experience, and actually a better way to deliver data to our clients. You will always have people at the center of the data transformation. The data transformation is about people. You're building solution actually for the analysts, so get them involved from the beginning and keep that feedback loop open. We pride ourselves actually at CRU of being a culture of learning and improvement. So take the chance of that data transformation as an opportunity for you to learn. It's an iterative process. You won't get it right from the first time, but basically don't be afraid to actually change things if they don't work out. Also plan beyond. That means that building all of these solutions actually are great, but they don't work on their own. You need to actually have a dedicated team to manage and maintain all these solutions working. And find a proactive partner, like Sigma, for example, who work with you and on all of your problems and try to overcome all the obstacles that you will find. In the end, I would like to actually thank all well, first of all, everybody who actually contributed to this data transformation. Basically, I would like to thank everybody from the product modeling team, from the steering committee, from our side, who actually helped us navigate all the strategic decision of this data transformation. Our lovely engineers, or some of them are actually in here as well. The BSC team and Sigma, fantastic partners all the way through. Infinite Lambda as well, and all the analysts and leaders at CRU who've been very patient with us during that transformation. And thank you again for your attention. One last thing, if you guys are interested in what Spade is an alternative to Fivetran that actually was built at CRU, and if you're interested, please visit these links. Any questions? Go for it.
The question is, what would be the problem if you had a single Excel file with all these fields and this problem?
So that Excel files is actually shared by a team. Some of them are actually in South Africa, some in South America, some in Asia, right? And Excel files were very limiting in terms of how these models were constructed. So basically, for regional teams, they had their own version of it. It's very prone to actually override the logic as well by an analyst who just like thought, I need to publish now, for example. They hard-coded, and it's very prone to errors. Also, we couldn't actually control anything in terms of governance. So, for example, the naming of the concept, the units, the conversion, the measurement, all of this kind of like we don't have any kind of control over it. It's the analyst who actually does that. Now, because we build all of this, we take care of all of this stuff in the background.
I think also, so previously we did have it in Excel and we had some really, really clever Excel models, but they were really slow. Like I remember hearing stories like it would take 20 minutes to open up an Excel file. And that was, so I think for our biggest model, we had 22 Excel files maybe that then became one Sigma model.
Yeah.
And instead of taking 20 minutes to open, it's almost instant. And we did have trouble with the load times, but it's a lot better than what we had in Excel.
Absolutely. The other thing is actually Excel is a combination of this interlinked web of connectivity where you have actually different tabs. Every tab, it's actually inherited from somebody who left the company. So you have no idea if it's related to the model or not. People would be afraid of actually touching that tab, afraid of breaking something. Now we actually have all the code between DBT and Sigma. So, and also the logic is very clear. Nobody actually touches that logic. We're the only team who's responsible to manage and maintain all of that.
Okay, thank you. And quickly, one more question. You mentioned that you version data. Could you please explain a little bit more on how you do it and how Sigma problem?
So we do it on a record level from the moment of inception. So we're at the moment that you ingest the data, we have an incremental database. And basically, so it's automatically actually versioned as it goes into the system. And then at the moment of the output, you have the metadata that you need to label that data as well.
And what technology do you use to do this version?
I think Martian would be helpful in that.
I can say that it's a DBT basically. It's a logical thing, right? It's not a physical implementation in the system, but it's more like the way the prototype is logically designed in DBT by attaching metadata at row level.
Thank you. Have you ever faced this type of resistance in replacing spreadsheets, saying that it's not Excel the problem, but it's the fact that the customer is always asking different questions and I need the flexibility to constantly change the logic? How do you get around that?
Very familiar story.
Yes.
Right. In a way, you try to actually focus on the bigger picture. So it's not about one team. It's not about one product. It's actually about the whole standardization that you're doing, the whole transformation. And also you need to deliver that to your customers. So if you want to leave out one team or one product, that's actually on them. It's not on you. You use some influence in that, basically.
Because the overuse of Excel creates a culture of I can build anything on the spot and be incredibly flexible. The moment you introduce rigidity in it, you change the system, and that requires there's a lot of friction there in saying now you need to use this, but this is not as flexible.
Yeah. We use a lot our CPO influence on that, actually, because he's the one who's actually enforcing that all logic need to be actually documented and kind of like embedded within our models. So it doesn't leave a lot of leeway to kind of like go around and build your own model, especially like we use a lot of what we called word math, which is basically translate all the math that you're doing in a way that everybody can pick up and understand. You don't have to be expert to understand it, but basically even a junior who comes in, who's actually just getting onboarded on this model, you can pick up the documentation and understanding. So this is, if you enforce it from the beginning, and this is what we did actually, it makes it so much simpler to actually understand the bigger picture.
I think also on an individual level, we worked really, really closely with the analysts, and we made sure that we were like listening to them, and they would run their first market outlook, and then we'd say, okay, what did you like? What did you not like? Sigma can do a lot of things that Excel couldn't do, that I don't think when we initially started building the model, they really saw. But once they ran through it a few times, they were like, okay, I'd like to have this feature, and kind of making them feel like they were heard and trying to understand that as much as possible really helped.
I was just wondering, you mentioned that you went through a whole lot of iterations to start with, but how with new people coming into the business and with the changing environment, how do you expect to change or manage change as time goes by, and how to navigate between a nice to have versus what would happen? Like, would you do bigger changes sort of like regularly? How would you navigate that basically?
So if you look at the end of the line, the handover, this is when we give them the model. Actually, we train the analyst on the process, and basically we schedule an MOT just to fine tune the model, first of all, also to introduce any kind of like changes to the model that needs to happen. In the beginning, we're kind of like making sure that the model produce the output that they used to actually produce in Excel. If they need to do any changes, this needs to go through a process of the BU head actually agreeing to these changes, and also the CPO actually need to approve it. So this makes sure that we don't do changes just because the analyst says so. We're just doing the changes because actually the business needs it.
Has it had any challenges with people trying to, because of the stringent sort of governance around it, have you had anyone kind of do with such a big business some sneaky Excels on the side, or have you managed to keep away from that mostly?
We're trying to control it as much as possible. I mean, I wouldn't actually say that nobody's doing it at the moment, but at least like it's much limited than it used to be.
I think we've had really good stakeholder engagement.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of advocates for Sigma in the like BU heads and stuff like that, which really helps get rid of the sneaky Excel files.
No, champions are really important. Yes, absolutely. And also, we're not that rigid when it comes to actually having essential changes.
Yeah.
We don't want to kind of have like special cases, which is only used for one time and basically forgotten later on. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I had a similar question with the people you share the app learning tool for Excel Sigma. And so was that an easy way of researching, or like
So Sigma is very, very easy as an interface. It's very similar to Excel. There's limitation of what they can actually do. This is why we put like some permission controls. So it's not only in Sigma, but it's also in Spade, and it's also like in the way that they ingest the data. So there is some stuff that they need to learn, but it's very little. So you didn't actually have that major kind of like upskilling that you need to do in a way, or reskilling in a way. our show and tell is like 1 hour. We just show them the whole process. Sigma is very intuitive, so you don't really need to actually have this big kind of like experience. Also, she created in the beginning a course which is mandatory actually at the company. So basically, any analyst that comes into the company, he needs to do the course first, and then we're preparing also all sorts of onboarding courses and stuff like that later on.
It's also if we have like one person in the team who's quite competent in Sigma, often they can help other people, like new joiners or people who have just moved their models to Sigma.
Thank you so much for your kind attention. And yeah,